I'll welcome everybody to a tasting of potential wines for Christmas Day. So we have a little interesting assortment, and hopefully you've got the same wines as me or something similar. And they're styles, I suppose, that would be the sorts of things you, I guess, do expect on a Christmas Day. So we can very much get everyone's opinion in a moment about Christmas Day foods and what wines you'd put with it and all that sort of stuff. So I got them in the order of the Crement, the sparkling white wine, which we'll discuss in a moment. And then I've got the Grenache, which has got a really, really interesting story. And then I've got the McLaren Vale sparkling Shiraz in that order, which is, of course, I think increasing in their size and body and taste and so on. So hopefully you've got the same as me. So pour yourselves a glass of the sparkling white, the Crement. And we've had these before. And in fact, we've had this particular wine before in a sparkling tasting, but for the price, it's pretty good. And just in case you don't have it, you can see there that it's French. It is not champagne, but it's pretty good French sparkling wine. All over France, not almost every district, but certainly most wine districts, winemakers do have a little play with making sparkling wine. And they use sort of bits and pieces, literally, that are left over sometimes. Although some districts, such as Bourgogne, definitely have quite a planned, serious interest in making sparkling wine. So wines would be grown for the purposes of making a sparkling wine, whereas in some of the districts, they make a bit of sparkling wine from various bits and pieces left over from their mainstream wines. And often those wines are just made for a bit of fun by the winemakers and maybe the family, and you can't really buy them and you don't see them. I have seen Crement de Bordeaux, which is made of Cabernet and Merlot, a couple of times, but never in Australia. It's a very small production. And those wines that are made in that traditional method, that is, the base wine is blended, they're put into a bottle with a bit more yeast and a bit more sugar, and normally a beer bottle cap, a crown seal, and they have a secondary fermentation in the bottle. They develop the lees when all those yeasts die off in the bottle, and so they have to be disgorged. That is where the bottle's put in a rack and it's shaken, or possibly a big Shiraz palette with a machine doing it, and that yeast sediment is shaken gently, but it slides down the bottle and rests against the cap. And then if you freeze the neck of the bottle, you'll trap that sediment in the frozen wine, and you can take the cap off and the pressure will shoot the frozen plug of wine out of the bottle with the yeast trapped in it. And then you can top the bottle up and then give it the permanent cork seal and send the bottle, well, let it rest for a period of time, but then send it off to be sold. And that's the method traditionnel, the traditional method. And once upon a time, that was called the champagne method, but now all over the world, including in Australia, the rule is that you can't say champagne method because the champagne means the district. So you'll see that these wines often have something where they'll say traditional method or something of that order on them, or in the small print. But the French term is Crement. You'll see here, Crement, and then put it where you can see it, Burgundy. So you get Crement de Loire, Crement de Bordeaux. There's Crement de Languedoc too, but normally the Languedoc producers would actually use their individual areas. So there's a famous one called Crement de Limoux, Limoux, which is a pretty famous wine. This is Blanc de Blanc, that is 100% Chardonnay, which is good. So the interesting thing about these wines, of course, is that their look and packaging looks like champagne, but these wines, even the good ones, sell for Australian dollars in the low 30s, I suppose. And so I think they're exceptionally good value and worth keeping an eye out for if you're looking for sparkling wines for any season, really, but certainly the Christmas season. Anyway, cut the cackle, get to the bottle. So you can see lots of fine bubbles the white wine colour to the aroma, and you can see the honeyed, slightly toasty aromas straight away, quite lifted aroma. And to taste it, you're looking for creamy but dry. And that wine does that quite well. It's got a firmer length. There's a back of the palate firmness on that wine that you generally don't get on Champagne. And the Champagne producers don't like that firmness of taste there, but you do tend to get that in Crement and various more rural method wines. This is a non-vintage, which means it's blended from multiple years. One of the things that would be happening with the production of that wine is that being made of Chardonnay in Burgundy, it probably starts out being made as if it was going to be a Chardonnay table wine. So there would be a little bit of extraction of flavour from the Chardonnay, and that's what gives you this wine that length and that firmness at the back of the palate if you compare to Champagne. So when you taste it, creamy but dry, but you know how I can still taste it now, so it's lingering on, but there's a back of the palate slightly metallic firmness. And the technical term is phenolic. It's what happens when you are a little bit aggressive with squashing the grapes. You get a bit of firm phenolic. In a red wine case, you'd be getting a bit of tannin out of the grapes. The Champagne producers go to great lengths to avoid that. It's very expensive though. So for example, the Champagne producers pick the grapes in a hand pick and hardly ever any machines. They put them in very shallow tubs and they stack the tubs up so that there's no weight of grapes to, under their self-weight, start crushing the grapes. So when the grapes arrive in the press houses in Champagne, the grapes are in really pristine condition. There's no leakage of juice or anything like that. And then they press them super gently and get a really clean juice that's got none of that extraction character. If you have riper Chardonnay, or Pinot Noir for that matter, as if you're going to make a table wine, and you then pick those grapes, you have to be very careful. And what can happen is that the self-weight of the grapes, the grapes can split open a little bit and a bit of juice can run out. And in the warm conditions that are there in autumn when the harvest is taking place, there's lots of natural yeast floating around in the atmosphere and on the grapes themselves. And so if a bit of juice escapes on the journey of the trucks from the vineyards into the winery, fermentation will get underway with the natural yeasts. And so that'll soften the grapes even further. So even a very gentle crushing will still extract some firmness of flavour out of those grapes that doesn't happen in Champagne. And that's the distinction between a Crement wine and a Champagne itself. But if you put that sort of very refined comparison aside, Crement wines are very flavoursome and pretty good. Also, of course, it's reflected in the price. I see this as a pretty cool Crement style, and like I said, the price is in about the low $30. Whereas, as you know, to get a Champagne from a relatively well-known producer, you have to spend $60, I suppose, and more. Around Christmas, there are Champagnes available, often on special, which are brought specially out for Christmas in Australia, and Dan Murphy and other big chains do that. Generally, they're not very good, and so if someone's trying to sell you a Champagne and it's from Champagne and the price is, say, $40, I'd be very suspicious. There's one that Dan Murphy do have called Paul Gessner, which is a sort of a play on the name Paul Roger, which people do recall as a very famous Champagne. And I don't think Paul Gessner is particularly good, even though it's a cheap price. So I would, for my vote, I'd rather a good Crement, or for that matter, a good Australian sparkling wine. We've talked about that before. So there's the Crement. So maybe we should whistle through and taste some quickly, and then we can get the comments and have a discussion about the time of the day on Christmas and the matching food. Let's have a little taste of wine number 2, and which is the Grenache. And this wine's got a very interesting story as well. The producer is Ochota Barrels, and Ochota is probably was one of the first producers in Australia to really be noticed for being a very organic and natural producer. And Ochota himself died not long ago, but he was one of those very, larger than life, very bearded, very natural sort of guys who was preaching the minimal interference in the winemaking and, very little, no preservative. He's smart enough to use a little bit of preservative because you need to do that, but you can make sure you use the organic versions. So he's famous for doing a style of Grenache, which we have here. Let's taste it. So you notice the paler ruby aroma. And on the aroma, it's got that really soft, fruity red cherry. There's a sort of a red cherry, slight bit of sage aroma. And to taste it, it's very soft and silky. It's very fleshy. Guess what it's very similar to? And I've been caught on this before. These sort of, I guess you'd call them new style Grenaches, served chilled, are very, very similar to Pinot Noirs. And of course, the price is a lot cheaper than a good Pinot Noir for a very similar style. You'll notice the alcohol level's 12%, which is also quite low. So they're easy to drink and very soft. I think served chilled. Mine's quite chilled, and it's pretty good drink actually. And it's got that shape, that you can taste it and see what you think in a comparison to Pinot Noir, but it's probably not as velvety and juicy as Pinot Noir, but it's certainly in that way. It's very interesting, and in a lineup of wines, I think if you had a good Pinot Noir, you'd probably see the difference. But if that wine's just given to somebody on its own like that, I think it's for those that like Pinot Noir, it's a very drinkable example. And again, in terms of classy Pinot Noir, I think it's a pretty good wine. It's a lot cheaper. So interesting wine to serve when you want a chilled, lighter red. And it's much better than quaffing, of course, but it's certainly a wine you can drink a bit of. And we'll come back and talk about the Christmas occasion in a moment. Just going to have a sip now of wine number 3, which is quite a big wine. I've already had a quick sniff of that, and you can see the style we have here. In a moment, I'm fully expecting Frederick and Hannelore to be shocked at this style of wine. I'm just waiting for Frederick to come back in front of the camera with the bottle, but these are a very traditional Australian style, and for decades and decades they used to be called sparkling Burgundy. If you're as old as me, you'd sort of remember that name, but that's also one of those names you can't use anymore. But you do get sparkling reds in France. Again, the Crement style. You can get Crement made of Pinot Noir, and in the south of France, in Languedoc, you get various reds blended there and turned into Crement, and they give you this sort of sparkling red style. I've actually had I mentioned before, in Bordeaux and in London, I had a Crement de Bordeaux, which was a sparkling red made of Cabernet and Merlot, which was pretty good actually, but a very tiny production from one of the big chateaux there. They sort of having a bit of a play around. And so this one here is quite a well-known sparkling red, and readily available and not too expensive. When you stick your nose in that, it is very much the the light black cherry, raspberry. It smells very much of Shiraz. And so it's very much a sparkling version of a varietal, like it's almost like a table wine Shiraz, but it's been made in a sparkling way.
Andrew, we didn't have to buy this one from Wine Experience. We already had at least 6 bottles in the cellar.
There you go.
This is a favourite of mine.
Yeah. No, it's well known, and Bleasdale's actually a pretty good McLaren Vale brand. Langhorne Creek actually, Langhorne Creek. So Langhorne Creek's much further down from McLaren Vale, and it's renowned as being very cold. Langhorne Creek's the district at the mouth of the Murray River around that Lake Alexandrina there, and it's a pretty cold region, a lot of cold wind and very flat area. When the Murray had plenty of water in it, they used to irrigate by flooding their vineyards sort of once or twice a year straight out of the Murray, but now there's not enough water for that, so they can't. But interesting area. Langhorne Creek's one of the components that's always used by the big well-known corporate red winemakers such as Wolf Blass and Penfolds, and others always have a Langhorne Creek component because the wine has got good fresh acidity in it, and this particular wine has that. So it's a red wine that's a table wine, red wine in the first place, perhaps only a little bit of oak. A more acidic wine is made deliberately because when you go to the process of doing the fermentation in the bottle later on, you need the natural acidity to be pretty firm. So the wine is fermented then in the bottle, so more yeast and sugar added to get a secondary fermentation. Same thing, riddled, disgorged and topped up. Now, the topping up with sparkling red is where there are quite a few differences. So this one is topped up with more of the same wine, and I think they just adjust a little bit the sweetness. Now, all traditional method wines, when they top up, can have a little bit of liqueur added. Some of the champagne houses add quite a lot, like Mumm non-vintage, the one with the red stripe, is known for adding quite a lot of sugar when they top up. Moet is quite sweet. You can get some quite sweet sparkling reds, and some of them are famous for it. So Hardy's still make, and sometimes they put it out under the name Rainella, sometimes Hardy's. There's a Seppelt Show Reserve sparkling wine, sparkling red. It's quite expensive, and it has quite a lot of liqueuring when they top it up, so it's relatively sweet. What happens is that the fizziness gives an apparent drying out of the taste when you taste it. So you need to leave a little sugar in these. When you taste that, it's got quite a lot of fine fizziness to it, which is very lifting, very refreshing, gives you a nice clean taste. Even though it's a sparkling red, and you get all that red wine character, it's actually a very refreshing drink. Mine's nice and cold. It's come out of the cold fridge, and on a hot day, it tastes pretty good. So they're 3 interesting wines. So the thing now is, tell us about Christmas Day. And some people have a Christmas meal with a gathering in the middle of the day, and some people have it in the evening. And there are all sorts of different meals and foods and different gatherings, whether it's family or some friends or a bit of both. And of course, all different wines. So I'd love to hear from everybody about how they do Christmas and how they view any or all of these wines fitting in. Meredith, you've got a really good grin there. What tell us about your plan Christmas Day and how you'd like to see these wines or some of these wines fit in?
Yeah, we're doing beef Wellington this year.
Ah, fantastic. And is that in the evening or lunchtime?
Don't know, actually. I haven't really decided. But planning to, pre-make them on Christmas Eve, but it'll probably be a lunchtime. We normally do a seafood, and the kids have asked this year, can we please have beef Wellington? So,
well, that's pretty good. That's very thoughtful of you to have the kids come in and make the demands. I see Ken's asking, will you be putting the foie gras around the
Absolutely.
with the pastry?
Yeah, and they want them individual because they all fight over the end bits. Pastry.
Sounds good. Can we get your address?
Absolutely.
No, that sounds fun. And so, what would you think of a wine to match beef Wellington on Christmas Day?
Oh, gee, the of these three, yeah.
Well, that's if you thought you might serve these three. You might have other plans.
I did buy a couple of them when they came through, but I haven't really thought exactly what we're going to serve with the beef Wellington. But probably the Shiraz. Colin, I'll turn around to Colin. A robust Grenache. This is Colin.
I reckon the sparkling Shiraz. Have you got the sparkling Shiraz? Yeah, you have it. I can see it. Okay.
Shiraz is quite good. That's what I'd serve with it.
But Colin likes the Grenache.
But a nice, not this middle Grenache, but one that's got a bit more body to it. So
yeah, okay. Because the foie gras and the beef thing, would be very sweet tasting, wouldn't it? Mind you, this Grenache should be pretty slippery, be pretty good with it. Maybe a good Pinot Noir.
I do like a nice Pinot Noir. So. But the girls don't. So
that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Paul, what about you? What are you going to do for Christmas Day, and what do you think about these wines?
Andrew, they're fantastic. I really enjoyed all three. Christmas, we will have Christmas lunch. And it's normally a lot of cold food, so it'll be prawns, it'll be ham, nice big ham, probably chicken. So I really like the Crement as a starter. I mean, I guess champagne is a normal Christmas, normal part of Christmas. Nice starter. I think probably mainly, nice zesty, refreshing sort of white is always good. Maybe start with a champagne, go to the zesty. In terms of the Grenache, you're right. It really did taste very much like a Pinot. Would have some similar sort of. So maybe with the white meats, maybe with the chicken, and that would be a nice one. I guess. I have always, and this is probably more tradition, but I end up probably on a nice claret at some point on Christmas Day, because my dad was English, so I end up, I end up there more out of tradition than anything else. But later, probably later in the lunch.
Yeah, fantastic. I think Pinot Noir and this Grenache would go really well with ham.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
I think, especially, if you carve the ham yourself, and nowadays, because ham's got a slightly fatty but very aromatic kind of taste about it. And, but on the other hand, it's not a very strong meat either. So, I always like the combination of ham, with Pinot Noir or a Grenache like this. It's, pretty good.
Excellent. That sounds good.
Yep. I'm going to leave Annalou and Frederick till later because Frederick's going to give us probably some recipes as well, which we'll all have to, note. But Amy and Todd, what are you going to do for Christmas Day, and how do you see these wines going?
So normally on Christmas Day we start fairly early, so we would pop the champagne in the morning and have it with some ham on toast for breakfast, to be honest. And then our big meal is definitely lunch. So we would do prawns and oysters, which would go well with the champagne. And then lunch is generally either like a hot ham or maybe even a turkey. So I think with the turkey, maybe the Grenache would probably be quite nice. But to be honest, I think Todd would probably just drink the sparkling red all day.
Me too.
Yeah.
But the sparkling Shiraz I find quite nice, with the seafood. So we generally do have the prawns and oysters as a starter.
Yep.
And, I do quite like that with something like the Grenache with, finish off with some pudding, with some brandy custard.
It sounds lovely. I went to an interesting tasting years ago of a producer who specialised in doing sparkling reds. They do other things, but they're still around. Actually, it was the brand called Peter Rumble, and you see Peter Rumble wines now sort of discounted. They're not like they used to be, but Peter Rumble himself was there, and he put on a number of Australia's, sparkling reds. And it is worth seeking out if you're interested, because you can get the Seppelt Sparkling Shiraz. There's the more basic one, which I think Dan Murphy has, and then they've got the Show Sparkling Shiraz, which is pretty expensive, but it's fantastic. And there are a number of others. And he put different foods down. And for these lighter sparkling Shirazes, he did seared tuna, where it was sort of coated with a soy and then seared and then served semi-warm, with the wasabi, Japanese, the wasabi mayonnaise. And the sparkling Shiraz was fantastic, even though it's a seafood. It was a combination thing.
Yeah, I agree. Most people, if you ask most people, they'd say, oh, it's the white wine with the seafood. But I think that sparkling Shiraz with prawns, and like you said, or maybe even a little bit of wasabi, is really nice, and it's what we enjoy.
Yeah. No, that'll be a good one. Okay. And David and Karen, what are you going to be doing? You're actually Adelaide at Christmas. You could be stinking hot over there.
Stinking hot or freezing cold. We are unsure, but we're going to be taking the wines along this year. So we'll take a sparkling red with us and a white and a red of some description. We've got plenty in the cupboard. So mind you, the truck hasn't arrived with all the other wine. So it'll be interesting to see what turns up. But we'll probably have cold meats, I think, and salads on the day, probably regardless of the weather. So wine-wise, not too sure. We're actually drinking a Grenache Shiraz Gibson, which is a bit hotter from the Barossa than the Ochota barrels, which would have been nice to have because I know the acidic levels in that would be a bit higher. So for Amy, that might be one that your husband might appreciate, the Gibson Grenache Shiraz from the Barossa might be a bit more body. On the Hungerford Hill, we love that sparkling Shiraz. Like that's outstanding. But the Bleasdale is a absolute winner. We've been drinking that for years, and we could well go that Christmas.
Thank you. Sounds great. So, Ken, tell us what Ken's in Mackay, which will be a little warmer than most of us. So you'll probably be in the air conditioning on Christmas Day. But tell us about your Christmas Day plans.
We like to take it easy. So Isabel likes to have lunch with salmon of one sort or another. We've got several different choices of the Huon premium stuff, the hot smoked steaks and their very good sliced smoked salmon, and the ocean trout pate, which is lovely. So a mixture of that with some goat's curd and a green salad and champagne, it has to be. Talking about champagne, and somebody else mentioned breakfast, of course, made me think Bucks Fizz. But I'll tell you what somebody gave me yesterday, which I was surprised by my reaction to it. It was an Australian champagne-style wine made with a dash of some sort of bitters or something. It had a sort of light rusty red colour. And when I sneaked to look at that, I thought, wow, this is surprisingly good. I rather like this. It was Chandon.
Yep.
So Chandon are making some sort of champagne with a dash of some sort of bitters in it or something. It was surprisingly good. I thought of it when you said breakfast.
Well,
but for dinner, we've got a choice of either duck or goose, and we haven't decided which. But whichever it is, it has to be accompanied by pomme frite cooked in goose fat, I think, doesn't it?
Yep. Is your recipes fully authenticated by the National Heart Foundation, I presume? So.
Oh, look, I was telling this story only recently. The first time I ever lectured in France at Toulouse, some of the guys at Toulouse University had done some wonderful research which proved, and I'm sure they're right, and nobody's proved otherwise since, that avian fat from duck and goose is heart healthy. I can send you the reference to the paper.
Right, I'll take your word for that.
I can still remember the name of the author. He had a splendid name, Olivier Lascaux.
Sounds wonderful. So, Frederick, tell us about your planned Christmas Day, and you better give us the particular dish and a few tips as well.
Yes, so we'll be having a bit of a different style Christmas because we're flying home on Christmas. So we're going back for the first time in 2 years, back to Belgium. And basically we bought the tickets whenever they were available. And the first thing that was available was on Christmas Day in the evening. And so that means that we'll be flying back to all the time zones and we'll have jingle bells all the way back to Belgium, I think. So on Christmas, we'll have a 23-hour flight that we're doing. But the good news is that the day after, we already have our Christmas lunch scheduled with our family. And as it goes, I think almost a month ago, I already got text messages from my mother. So what do you want to have? What is it? So, and of course, the traditional style things. So what we typically have on Christmas Day is a typical French dish as a starter. You can also have it as a main, and it's called sole du gléré. And it's like the fillet of a Dover sole, and you sort of curl it up, and it comes in a sort of a creamy sauce, but the creamy sauce is still very light. And it's a very famous dish in the French traditional cuisine. And apparently it's very difficult to make it. We've never made it, I think, but my mother is very good in making it. There's a family recipe. And so we typically have that as a starter. A lot of people would say that is already pretty heavy, but we have that as a starter, and that would typically come probably with a Chablis. But I think the Crement would go as well, right? Yeah. The Crement would be very good with that. And then the main one, so of course, you know, in Belgium, it will be, I looked at the weather forecast, it will be around 0 degrees, right? It will be very chilly. So we have hot, warm dishes. And so the main dish will probably be pheasant. But my mother already texted back that she could not get her hands on a good pheasant. So it will probably a rabbit stew. And when we go for the rabbit stew, in the winter, we will typically go with a Brunello or a Barolo to go with that, right? Because it needs to be a bit warm and heavy. And so, and that typically starts at around 11 a.m. and it takes about till 6 p.m. And we just sit at a table and have all bottles of wine, and that's the whole day basically.
Oh, sounds wonderful. So you said Dover sole, which is of course a particular type of fish. In Australia, what would be a type of fish that you've seen that would be comparable?
I find that very difficult to compare the Dover sole with sort of anything that we had here. We had very good sort of similar white fish type, but like the barramundi or anything, it's never been very comparable to Dover sole.
Barramundi is very fishy, isn't it? Very strong. Whereas Dover soles are very soft, very white, very delicate fish. So you'd probably have to go with
what about
snapper?
Flathead?
Yeah, blackhead. Yeah.
Flathead.
The flathead, yeah.
Yeah, the flathead fish.
Yep, something very clean, white. Yeah.
I read into the
Whiting's another one. Yep.
Like the sole du gléré, and they said you could also make that with flathead. So I think that would probably come close.
Yeah. Sounds pretty good. And that would be Chablis, and then you'd move along. And of course, that'd be interesting. Brunello is Sangiovese, and Barolo is Nebbiolo. So both, Italian reds, very suited to strong, gamey flavours. This sparkling Shiraz would probably go fairly well in that. I would have thought that with the rabbit sort of casserole or something that you're talking, that the either of these two Australian reds would probably do the trick pretty well.
Frederick
I
and
think-
Hannelore. Oh, sorry. What about dessert? What about?
Wait a minute. First of all, what sauce are you going to serve with the pheasant?
The pheasant comes with a Dauphine champagne, so it's a cognac sauce, right? It's a sort of a creamy cognac sauce that you only make it with pheasant. So it's called pheasant Dauphine champagne, and so that requires sort of a strong wine. And basically, as a dessert, that would typically be a sort of a bush, right? A Christmas bush that you would have sort of the ice cream. Yeah.
I'm asking for two reasons. One, because we're having partridge this evening, and the same sort of sauce would probably go quite well with partridge. But second, wouldn't you have to be a little bit careful, because both partridge and pheasant are very lean meats. And if you have something too tannic with that, like Nebbiolo, you're going to be in danger of having too much tannin. That's why I was asking about the sauce. If you've got a nice fatty sauce with it, that'll tend to balance it out a bit, perhaps. But if it's just lean, like venison or pheasant with Nebbiolo, it's going to be a bit tannic, possibly.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So it is very much about the sauce. It's sauce pairing with the wines.
Sounds very interesting.
Send us the recipe for a sauce, because we've got some fabulous cream from a local dairy right at the moment. And we could perhaps do it. And I've got lots of cognac. Toujours le cognac.
Yeah, well, Ken, you could raid that cupboard of yours and find all sorts of gems in there that you could probably turn into the cooking.
Indeed, yes. Indeed.
All sounds pretty good. These three wines here do have their interesting stories, in that we have something which is, I think, a terrific sparkling wine at a budget, that is Crement, and worth keeping in mind. You've got probably the king of the natural wine movement that was very much a cult hero to some. If you go to so many of the smarter wine lists in the fashionable bistros in places, Melbourne and Sydney, the Ochota brand, because he makes quite a few wines, are very, very fashionable, and it's sort of considered one of those brands you must have. And interesting, if you want to have a bit of a look, I think that restaurants and bistros that do wine well normally do everything else pretty well, whereas the corollary of that is not true. So if you get a bistro or a restaurant that does the wines really well, normally food, coffee, service, all the little bits and pieces are normally done particularly well. I'm not a huge fan of Gourmet Traveller Wine Magazine, but I quite like the annual Gourmet Traveller Wine Magazine Wine List Awards. And to get to the first base, you've got to have a certain quality of wine list. And a lot of wine lists get entered and they don't make it. Then they give a 1 glass, 2 glass or 3 glass award. It's like Michelin stars or chef's hats or whatever you want to call it. So a 3 glass rating is pretty high. Mind you, 3 glass ratings normally mean a wine list of 500 wines, and normally stupendous prices. But they do have small wine list awards, and they do regionals as well. So you can actually go on the website, and the 2021 results came out about 2 weeks ago. So you can go onto the website and you can actually browse by postcode and region. So if you're interested in, the restaurants in a particular part of Sydney or country Queensland or something, you can actually dial that in and get a list. And it's quite interesting. I'm intrigued because in Brisbane, the best wine bar and the best wines by the glass lists were both won by a bistro here called Crew Bar, which has been around for ages. Most people know it. And it's not expensive. It's pretty good, very casual. And then a bistro in Ashgrove, which is an inner western suburb of Brisbane, which is very, staid middle class. It had a bistro that has never been mentioned before, and it got 3 glasses. And it's got a 500 wine list, and they've got about 60 wines by the glass. This is in Ashgrove. I nearly fell over. And they've got Van Joan from Switzerland and, wines made. It's called something Larder, Ashgrove Larder or something. Yeah, Meredith.
Wine Larder.
Wine Larder, Ashgrove Wine Larder. They've got white wines, Australian and
Wine and
French.
Larder. Cool.
Yeah, Wine and Larder. And they've got these wines made under floor, FLOR, the sherry floor. So aping that Van Joan sort of, from Savoie and Switzerland. And they've got 2 or 3 of those, both French and Australian examples by the glass. I'm amazed that someone in Ashgrove would go and choose those wines, but they do. Anyway, it got that rating. So it's amazing what you discover. When you look at the 3 glass awards, of course, they're a roll call of the very expensive great restaurants all around the capital cities mainly, but there's a lot of regional things as well. So it's very interesting seeing what's there. Ochota Barrels is a darling. Almost every great award there talks about the blend of the traditional brands and also the, some of the new and groovy rising stars such as Ochota Barrels. Well, in many people's eyes, Ochota Barrels is not a rising star anymore. He's already made it. So very interesting to see that. So that's why there's always a good story about that. And I think that lighter, newer style of Grenache is very attractive for what it's designed to do. That is serve chilled and be something that you could serve instead of a Pinot Noir. And if you do have it in your arsenal of wines to be served, it's a great conversation piece because, I'd be hard pressed there if it was just stuck in front of me to not pick it as Pinot Noir. I'd probably a bit of a wake up to the fact that these new Grenaches are around, but it's a very, very interesting and very good wine. And of course, sparkling reds. To me, sparkling reds are like dessert wines. The Botrytis dessert wine styles. If you ask people would they light a glass, they sort of think, oh no, it's time to go home or whatever, and they just don't think of having them. But if you don't ask and you just serve it, everybody loves it. So if you serve sparkling red, you just have it. I don't like it as before a meal. I think sparkling light's the go there because sparkling reds are not an aperitif accompaniment by any stretch. But if you've got the gamey food or the stronger flavours or so on, and you just serve it, everyone goes, oh, sparkling red, oh, it's a bit interesting, and they're not sure. But as soon as they start sipping it, they love it. And it goes so well with some of the dishes we've been talking about because the fizz gives it that drying out, and it can be very refreshing with quite strong, gamey and fatty foods. So it's worth having. I think they're terrific and very traditional. You spoke before about families, and my dad used to serve sparkling Shiraz for Christmas. It was his big treat. He used to serve, we're talking the 1960s now, because I'm very old. And in the 1960s in Australia, everybody drank beer, spirits, or tea with meals. And wine in Australia was consumed by either very wealthy people that lived in Adelaide or, I won't say the rude word, but Southern European migrants that recently arrived in Australia. Italians and Greeks and so on used to drink wine, but otherwise no one did. And my dad not only had quite a good wine selection, but he used to serve sparkling red at Christmas. And it was always a big winner. Everyone loved it. So it's just something to have, and they're really interesting wines to serve. So it's something to have in the arsenal. I think it's always a very interesting thing. Now we'll be consulting with Laura and about that's daughter Laura about organising for the new year. So we'll probably we'll do something and we'll get a date, and I may try and do it from the winery in middle or late January. So keep an eye on the website and the email. If Frederick and Hannelore are stuck in Belgium, they can join us. You'll have to get up at, let's see, 5 p.m. That'll be, that will be 7 a.m. 7 a.m. That's manageable. You can join us from Belgium. And of course, I'd be interested in any themes that you'd like to see. There have been some requests to sort of return to some classic wine appreciation topics for the new year. That is how to recognise varying qualities of wines and comparisons of the same variety. So doing Chardonnay between France, Australia, New Zealand, and doing Pinot Noir across the 3 countries. So I've had a couple of requests come in the new year to do those sorts of great classic themes. So very happy to get any requests though and accommodate them. I was thinking, and again, like to hear the comments, I was thinking perhaps 2 Sunday evenings a month would be about right. And whether we sort of pick, it's always the first 2 Sundays so that it's kind of regular, so you don't have to sort of consult the diary too much and to make it into a pattern. When all the COVID restrictions end, of course, you'll be able to run out and go to live wine tastings again, I presume. I kind of feel that some of the habits we've learned during the 2 years of COVID will probably stick. And I think under certain circumstances, unless you got absolutely COVID, unless you got zoomed out with millions of Zoom meetings, in fact, Zoom can be very, very convenient to do these sorts of things. So,
Andrew, it's more about the time to get the wine from wine experience. That's the main thing. So, 2 Sundays a month is good, but just as long as because a couple of times it's been, I think, just the delays with Australia Post, it's just been a bit hard to get the wines on time.
But on a good note, we have a good story to tell everyone, a bit of a Christmas story about how wine is more than just drinking. We received a phone call about 3 weeks ago at dinner time. I thought it was a telemarketer, and it was from Tempest 2 Winery, and we're a member of their wine club, and they've got a cellar door here in the Hunter Valley near us. And after sort of some confusion, we found out that because we were a member of their wine club and we bought 6 bottles of wine, we won a new car.
How random! That never happens to.
So they had a nationwide competition where if you bought a bottle of Tempest 2 wine, you went in the draw to win a new car worth $60,000, and we were the winner.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, they sold.
Have you got it yet?
Yeah, we've taken delivery of the car. It's a brand new Mini Cooper S, fully electric. It's in the garage.
Yeah.
They had 43,000 entries. We bought their summer pack, which was 6 bottles of wine. It was worth $135. It's the cheapest we've ever bought a car for. So,
does it have Tempest 2 branding on it?
No.
We'll have to steam the labels off the bottles and stick them on the back.
Stick them on. Yeah, that's right. Well, that's fantastic. It's the best value wines you've ever purchased.
We've ever bought. So so we love Tempest 2 now, all the time.
Yeah. Well, Tempest 2 are a great producer that always enters quite a bit of wine into the Cairns Wine Show, which I often go up and judge at. And Cairns Wine Show is a really good wine show, and they often do really, really well with their Semiols, their Hunter Valley Semiols. And they've got that premium one that's got a kind of a metallic label, I think of what they call it. And
pewter or something, I think.
that's something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really good. So yeah, that's interesting. So well, congratulations. That's a great story.
There's more to wine than just enjoying the wine.
Of course there is. There's all sorts of things you can get out of wine. It's terrific to see everybody. Now we've got
before you go, can I make one comment and ask two questions?
Of course.
But I know there was a bit of talk about Italian wine, the Barolo and the Brunelli, but Brunello. the other one I love is Amarone for dessert. We were talking about dessert wines. That's I think is fantastic. Brunello, yeah. The Amarone I love in terms of dessert wines. The two questions are one for you, which is if you don't like Gourmet Travel or Wine magazine, what wine magazines do you like? And then the other one is for Frederick and Hannelore, which is the Netherlands has just gone in lockdown. Is Belgium, are you going to be okay in what's happening in Belgium? Is Belgium okay?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we're following the news, and so the UK is really bad at the moment. The Netherlands just locked down. Germany is close to lockdown, and little Belgium is in between there and still sort of hanging on.
Okay.
And we're very much hoping that we will not be arriving in a lockdown, because that could mean that we cannot visit any family or friends. We're sort of already realizing that probably most restaurants will be closed, because we were very much looking forward to visiting all the restaurants and for tasting wines and everything. But for now, I think we're hopeful that they will remain open, but the situation in Europe is not very good, right? So we'll have to see. Right. And Andrew will come back to the Amarones. We're also a big fan of the Amarones, but we've already asked that question. And I think, Andrew, you said you've looked around, you couldn't find any good Amarones, and you said maybe we'd better not try this here.
I certainly have tried. I've had a few of the Italian ones that are available, and it's a very specialised product. And the Italians really prize them, so they're quite expensive. And it's difficult in Australia to find them. I think Amarone wines often are a very specialised production, a bit like making Crement of red wine in France. You know, they're around, but they're a bit hard to get. One of the things with Amarone is that because of the production method, this is where the raisined red grapes, you deliberately let the grapes go a bit raisiny. And you can do that by cutting partly through the cane on the vine, or you can actually harvest the grapes and put them in racks or on mats in the sun. And just when they start to dry out and turn into raisins, you then go through the normal fermentation process. One of the issues is that raisin grapes, where the skins break down, if you're not careful, the fruit fly find them very quickly, and the fruit fly brings in the acetic bacteria. And so a lot of Amarones of the lesser quality are very full of acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde is vinegar, is the name. That's what vinegar is. And so a lot of lesser Amarones are very vinegary, and you can really taste it. If they get if they're not too oxidized, they don't go too vinegary, but they get this smell of nail polish remover, which is their acetone version. And so you get wines that reek of nail polish remover. And that's always been a bit of an issue. Having said that, the top Italian producers dry the grapes in racks, and the racks are in special buildings that have got the fine gauze to keep the fruit fly out. Yeah. And they use the ultraviolet lights and all that sort of stuff to stop fruit fly from bringing in the acetaldehyde or the acetic bacteria. So the wines are cleaner, but very, very difficult to find. I've in the experiences I've had, the degree of the raisin can vary too. If they're very raisin, the wines are very porty and powerful. If they're a little bit lesser in that raisinning. They can be still quite fresh and just an element of richness on them. So there's enormous variation in the style, but interesting to seek out. It's all part of that sort of very interesting, variety of the wines that you can seek out. Certainly they go with very strong food. Amarone wines, I went to the northern part of Valpolicella, just north of Verona, and it was just this beginning of their truffle season, and they were serving set courses in bistros and restaurants where every course you had was very heavily truffled, and the prize wine to have with this very strong truffle flavour was Amarone. And Valpolicella Amarone is one of the principal regions that puts the wine, and it's pretty interesting, pretty good. Paul, what was your other question? Sorry, if you just
someone put up Quintarelli, which is also my favourite Amarone, but also Corvina as well. Actually, I love that. I mean, they're fantastic. But my other question was the wine magazine. So if you don't like Gourmet Traveller, what do you think's the best wine magazine to subscribe to?
Well, there's a good one is a free one. There's there's an Australian wine books and publications publisher called Wine Titles, one word. And if you register with Wine Titles, they do a daily wine news. They have an Australian, New Zealand section and then a world section, and they just repeat all the wine press from all over the world. And you get that on an email, and if you're interested in the story, you can click on it and it takes you to the source document, which may be, the Wine and Spirit Insider, which is a UK trade publication, or Harper's, or one of the magazines, and it's free. So you just got to register. Mind you, you cop a bit of advertising as well as usual, but it's pretty good. So that's Wine Titles. There's a wine trade one, which is called Wine Business, which is a UK-based one. There you go. there it is. Yeah, and you can get, and Wine Business it's a UK-centric, but it also does European and USA and a bit of Australia. And it's a daily wine business news, but anything to do with the change of wine law or a different French wine thing or new bits and pieces would be on there. A good consumer one, again, very international, is if you go on to Jancis Robinson's page. She has a once a week free email, and a lot of her stories is just the front part. And to get the full story, you've got to subscribe. But she also puts a lot of stuff up that's free. Now, it's mainly, again, European-centric, but she does quite a bit of Australian wine tasting. And she also has news about, and, she's quite up to date. So if there's Australian wine news, she has that. So she ran the story. The Melbourne Wine Show was delayed till just last week. And normally the Melbourne Wine Show would be in about July, August, sometime like that, but COVID delayed it. And so it had a winning wine, but 2 weeks before, the same wine won at the Mornington Peninsula Regional Wine Show, then has a big international Pinot Challenge where they have Pinot Noirs from all over the world that people enter. Effectively, it's mainly Australian and New Zealand, but the same Pinot Noir won there, and it's a Tasmanian brand which has just sort of been released called Osso, O-S-S-O, and you can Google search that. So the win by Osso in both the Melbourne Wine Show and the Australian Pinot Challenge and the Mornington Peninsula Wine Show, that popped up across the same 2 or 3 days in Wine Titles, Jancis Robinson, Wine Business. So they all ran the story about this new producer. And you can sort of get the news in that way, and all of this is free. So I find that quite interesting. As a read, if you wanted a magazine where you wanted to actually do a hard copy, it's tricky. Gourmet Traveller Wine's okay. It's a bit sort of limited and biased, but it's okay. A good one is Decanter magazine from the UK. Now, if you're happy to take it just in the ordinary mail, it's quite cheap. If you want the airmail version, it's quite expensive. But it's a hard copy and it comes through regularly. I think there's it's monthly, and it has a whole lot of it's reasonably technical but aimed at consumers. Very European focused, but they do the annual Californian wine tasting, and they do quite a lot of Australian tastings, although the Australian ones they do are mainly the Australian ones available in the UK market. But nonetheless, it's pretty good. And they have terrific beginner consumer briefings. So if you sort of want to learn a fair bit about Bordeaux suddenly, once a year they do a big Bordeaux special, and it's written for someone who's never looked at Bordeaux before. And then they do once a year Burgundy, once a year Champagne, once a year Italy, once a year Portugal, once a year Spain. And sometimes those once a year features are so big, they actually have a little booklet that comes with a magazine, and sometimes they keep it in the magazine. Obviously, for me, don't find any of that particularly. I scan it to see if there's anything new, but it's not that big a deal for me. So I actually stopped. I didn't renew my Decanter subscription about 2 years ago. But, I'd been getting it for decades, and it's pretty good if you sort of want to, have a bit of a general read. The photos are sumptuous. The writing's very English and very correct and very good, mostly Masters of Wine. It's not that expensive. If you really want to feast your eyes, but it's totally biased writing, Wine Spectator is interesting. It's an American magazine. It's a huge, big, glossy format. It's aimed at, the consumers for Wine Spectator are very wealthy Californians and New Yorkers. So they really only start talking about wine that starts at about $60, $70, $80, $90 US and goes above that. They're huge on the iconic Californian wines. So they have endless tastings of Harlan and Screaming Eagle and all of those 15.5%, 16% Californian wines that are all at 15.5% and 16% alcohol. But the photos are sumptuous, absolutely sumptuous. And they run really sumptuous stories where they give you travel guides to Bordeaux and Burgundy, and they give you a rundown of every 3-star Michelin restaurant that you need to go to in Bordeaux, where it'll cost you $600 and $700 per person each time, but they run all that sort of stuff. So it's very sumptuous and interesting. But again, I stopped my subscription to Wine Spectator many years ago. It's all their stuff's out of my price range, but yeah, it's a very interesting magazine and worth a look. You can go online. They have both Decanter and Wine Spectator have good websites. And normally the stories that are about 6 months old are all by then on the website and they're free. So they're worth a look. So you can do a lot of stuff just sort of having a look on a website, really. And they're, quite sumptuous. I suppose you'd have to say that the magazine formats, that is the hard copy formats, are written for, wealthy older people that can't be bothered getting all their information out of a computer screen, which, there's people around. So therefore, they tend to lean towards the wines that appeal to that type of buyer. Overwhelmingly wine reviews and wine information is out of the digital and social platform formats, particularly if you're younger. Although I find the daily email from wine titles and wine business, if you sort of in the trade, and even if you're not in the wine trade, you just want to have a quick scan, they're pretty good and they're free. So that's quite a good thing. So something to look at there.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, lovely to see everybody. Everybody have a wonderful Christmas. And we'll be doing things in different shapes and forms. It's amazing how you can all enjoy it in the different places. Frederick, yeah?
Andrew, you haven't told us what you will be doing on Christmas. What you will be having.
Well, we lived in Cairns for quite some time, and Cairns was a place with a lot of expatriates, and there were people who were on their own, so to speak. Mind you, might be family, but they weren't going back to where they came from. And it was surprising how many people weren't really hooked up to do anything for Christmas. So we started a movement on Christmas Eve, which was the Christmas orphans sort of get together. And we used to make it optional to go to the 7 p.m. It was a Catholic carol service mass, and it was optional. About half the people would go to that, even if you're not Catholic, it didn't matter because the music was quite good. And then they'd all come straight back to our place, and we would have the Christmas Eve, and we would do canapes and champagne and wines like we've just had on the Christmas Eve. And then everybody would do something different on Christmas Day. But we had that for many years. This year, we're going to be at our cottage at the winery up on the Granite Belt. And we're going to the Catholic Church ceremony in Stanthorpe on the Christmas Eve, because it's very Italian. And of course, Italians love what they call the vigil mass, the night before. And so we're going to that. And it's being Italian, it's a very short mass, and then they all congregate afterwards outside. And so we're going to do that. So we'll be the orphans this time, although on Christmas Day, our second daughter and partner will be there for Christmas in a few days. And then later towards New Year, our first daughter and grandson will be there as well. So that's good, because I'll be able to get some work done around the farm by my strapping, strong sons-in-law. I hope. We'll see what happens. So that's our Christmas this year. It's going to be a bit of a new adventure for us, because we'll be at our second home, I suppose you'd have to say. So that's us. So anyway, we'll send Christmas greetings. We'll do some, maybe we'll do some selfie photos and WhatsApp them through or something like that on Christmas Day, and you can sort of see how it is. The middle of Christmas Day in Stanthorpe will be quite hot, but the evening will be quite cold. We're up there this week just gone, and in the evenings you've got to put a pullover on. So that's quite nice. So we'll be having an evening dinner, which I think on Christmas Day. And son-in-law number 2 does a big Christmas brunch. And it's interesting because he cooks 100% of it on the open fire. We got a fire pit out the front. So he does all the campfire oven and the frames that swing in over the flame. And he does eggs Benedict and bacon and coffee and tea and birch and muesli soaked the night before and all that sort of stuff. So that whiles away a few hours on a Christmas morning. So that should be lovely. So a bit of a difference. Lovely to see everybody.
Hannah-law, lock yourselves away, get your PCR tests, and stay safe for your trip. Best wishes.
Yeah, that's right. Stay safe with the travelling. Yeah, send photos of. We can email each other on Christmas Day with photos of respective Christmas celebrations. All of us. We'll see you. Have a look. Hopefully, see everybody again in. It'll be probably that third Sunday night in January. I'll send the details. And yes, Amy, we're trying for that. And Wine Experience had a couple of technical problems again this time around, and I guess I just didn't hustle them as hard as I should have done, but we'll do that for next year. So there's lots of lead time to get the wine packs. So yeah. So enjoy Christmas, and we'll talk in January.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
And Paul, see you in January, Paul. That'll be great to catch up then. Okay, all the best.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, ciao. Bye.
See you later.